Hey everyone, picture this. After years of icy silence, hostage swaps, and brutal trade wars, Canada and China are suddenly cozying up again, with top officials shaking hands in Beijing and whispers of a blockbuster summit between Prime Minister Mark Carney and President XiJinping. Could this be the geopolitical reset we've been waiting for? Or just another trap? If you're tuned into Canada-China Relations 2025 drama, this shift is huge. And it's happening right now, shaking up everything from tariffs to global alliances. Stick around as we unpack the Anita and Beijing visit details, the hidden leverage plays, and why Beijing's sudden charm offensive might signal desperation more than friendship, because this isn't random diplomacy. It's a high-stakes chess move that could redefine Canada's role on the world stage. If you're hooked on Canada-China diplomatic thaw stories or searching for Mark Carney XiJinping summit updates, hit like right now to boost this in the algorithm, and subscribe for more breakdowns on these trending international relations twists. Let's dive deep, because the devil's in the details, and you won't believe what's really at stake. So, let's kick things off with the basics of this bombshell development in Canada-China Trade Talks 2025, after a brutal stretch of strained ties, including that infamous hostage diplomacy era, and escalating tit-for-tat punishments, things are thawing fast. Just this past week, Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister Anita Anand jetted to Beijing for face-to-face bilateral talks with her Chinese counterpart, Wang Yi. The big reveal. Both sides agreed to reopen communication channels wide open, and they are even floating the idea of a high-level summit between Carney and Xi. Have you been following how Canada-China EV tariffs and canola disputes have poisoned relations for years? Does this sudden outreach feel like genuine progress to you, or something more calculated? To get the expert take, let's hear from a recent global news segment that nailed the significance. Here's the clip.
Diplomatic relationship between Canada and China appears to be on the mend after years of strain and a more recent escalation in trade tensions. But Foreign Affairs Minister Anita Anand was in Beijing this past week, where she held bilateral trade talks with her Chinese counterpart Wang Yi, with both Ottawa and Beijing agreeing to reopen communication lines, potentially paving the way for a summit between MarkCarney and Xi Jinping. Lynette Ong joins us now, Distinguished Professor of Chinese Politics at the University of Toronto and Director at the Munk School's China Governance Lab. Professor, thanks for being here today.
Thank you.
Let me start by asking what you made of Minister Anand's visit to Beijing, because this is only the second time that a Canadian foreign minister has visited China in some 8 years. Is it fair to say that this is significant?
Yes, I think this is a significant development. I see this as, at a very bare minimum, a thawing of relations. But I'm also fairly cautious about it. I think it could potentially signal warming of ties between the two countries, but I think it's still early days.
Isn't it refreshing to hear from someone who's spent a career dissecting Chinese politics, not just regurgitating headlines, someone who cuts through the hype with real critical thinking? That's gold in an age where misinformation runs rampant, and it underscores why this Anita and Wang Yi meeting 2025 isn't just a photo op. It's a pivotal moment after 8 long years of minimal high-level visits. The professor's caution hits home. This could be a genuine warming, but early days mean we need to watch closely. And this isn't isolated. Journalists worldwide confirmed just days ago that talks are restarting on those flashpoint issues like canola exports and electric vehicle tariffs that have hammered bilateral ties. China's foreign minister outright said they are open to dialogue at every level. But why the pivot now? After all the bad blood, what's changed in Beijing's calculus that makes Canada look appealing again? Hold that thought, because if you think this is pure goodwill, think again. Beijing's economy is teetering, its international rep is bruised, and Canada's moderate, resource-rich stance might just be the neutralizer they need. But is Ottawa walking into a familiar snare? Don't get me wrong, this Canada-China Relations Improvement 2025 buzz isn't about old-school sentiment. It's a strategic re-engagement driven by pressure points on both sides. Beijing doesn't thaw relations out of the kindness of their hearts. They do it when vulnerabilities mount, like economic wobbles or strained global ties, making them seek out stable partners. Canada, with its strategic positioning and politically balanced approach, suddenly becomes a useful counterweight, not just to China, but in the eyes of other global players too. If you've been tracking rare earth metals Canada-China tensions, does this feel like an escalation of that resource chess game, or something bigger about sovereignty and leverage? The real intrigue here is testing whether Canada is finally embracing its full potential as a sovereign global force, or if it's still orbiting the gravity of superpowers like China and the US. In a world where trade isn't just economics, but a battle for influence, isn't it time Canada flexed its muscles without getting entangled? And speaking of deeper insights, if you're into honing that kind of sharp, critical analysis to spot these undercurrents in global news, but let's not stop there, the tariffs are where the rubber meets the road, revealing who's really holding the cards in this high-stakes negotiation. At the core of this recent Canada-China trade tensions escalation 2025 are those punishing tariffs that have defined the rift for years, and they are front and center in these talks. Canada hit Chinese EVs with a whopping 100% tariff, plus duties on steel and aluminum, prompting China to retaliate hard on agricultural exports like canola. But get this, the Canadian feds just eased some steel and aluminum tariffs last Friday, though the EV war remains, and that's China's big gripe. To break it down, here's more from that expert discussion.
Tariffs really are at the center of a lot of the recent tension. Canada has imposed tariffs on Chinese EVs as well as on steel and aluminum, and in turn, China has imposed tariffs on a number of our agricultural exports, including canola. Now, on Friday, we saw the federal government ease some of those steel and aluminum tariffs, but the 100% tariffs on EVs seem to be the main sticking point as far as China is concerned. Do you expect any movement on that front?
I think the context of Canadian tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles or EVs is significant. Canada started imposing that sometime last year after during the Biden administration. So Biden's team imposed tariffs, 100% tariffs on Chinese EVs, and Canada decided to follow suit. So that was the context. But now then we have re-election of President Trump. I think U.S.-Canada relations is now in a different phase compared to when Biden was in power. So we need to think about the context very, very differently. And then, in addition to that, Canada is also in a range of trade negotiations with the United States. And what sort of benefits would tariffs on Chinese EVs bring to Canada? I think that is the very big questions that we have to ask. And the Chinese have more or less explicitly or implicitly linked Chinese EVs to their tit for tat tariffs on our canola oil exports, and that has huge impact on canola oil producers in parts of the country.
Boom, there it is, the expert laying bare how these Canada-China EV tariffs 2025 are no side issue. They are the epicenter of leverage warfare, with Canada initially mirroring Biden-era US moves, but now navigating a Trump re-election landscape that's flipped everything. With US-Canada relations in flux, do those EV tariffs even benefit Canada anymore, or are they just a relic holding back bigger wins? China's not subtle, they've tied their canola hits directly to the EV duties, slamming prairie farmers hard and creating provincial rifts. Ontario's pushing to keep the EV walls up to protect auto jobs, while the prairies want canola relief yesterday. Isn't this the perfect storm showing trade isn't abstract policy, but a tug-of-war affecting real livelihoods, from factory floors to fields? If Canada caves on EVs for canola peace, is that smart leverage or selling out sectors? Stay tuned, because the human rights angle adds a moral minefield that could blow it all up. This isn't just economics. The Canada-China human rights versus trade debate 2025 looms large, testing whether values take a backseat to deals. When pressed on whether the Carney government might overlook civil rights abuses for economic gains, the response was firm and nuanced, exactly what you'd expect from someone steeped in the intricacies of Chinese governance. Here's the key exchange.
To your point, part of the strained diplomatic relationship between both countries has been on account of human rights, on civil rights considerations. So would you say it seems like the Carney government is now willing to look past those issues for the sake of trade?
No, I don't think Carney would, because he represents the values of Canadian. I wouldn't expect the prime minister to do so, and I just do not think it is wise to cast aside human rights in pursuit of trade consideration. But I would frame the debate slightly differently. I think we should be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. We should also be fairly conscious of what we can do individually as a country. If we want to pursue human rights agenda, we should do it with a bunch of other countries that share similar values and be able to collectively press and put pressure on on China to improve its human rights record, to change its conduct on arbitrary detention, and so on. And there are plenty of partners in the Indo-Pacific who share these values with Canada that we can work with. So that on the one hand. On the other hand, we should keep on pursuing trade and tariff reduction in the manner that actually serve Canada's interests. I think we should be able to disentangle the two issues and to think about doing them in tandem.
In your view, can Canada really walk and chew gum on human rights and trade with China without one undermining the other, especially given past arbitrary detentions and civil rights crackdowns? The expert's framing is spot on. Carney won't ditch Canadian values for deals, but pursuing rights solo is futile. Better to rally Indo-Pacific allies for collective pressure while chasing trade wins that serve Canada. Isn't this the ultimate test of diplomatic maturity, disentangling morals from money without compromising either? History shows it's tough. Human rights often get weaponized or sidelined in big power games, but if Canada pulls it off, it cements its status as a principled player. With partners sharing values ready to join, could this be the moment Canada builds a coalition that actually moves the needle on China's record? Looking ahead, if that Carney-Xi Summit 2025 materializes, and signs point to yes, it'll be more than pomp, it'll spotlight Canada's global evolution. Will Ottawa stride in with leverage, demanding fair play on tariffs and rights, or slip back into eager-to-please mode? Softening tariffs, strategic partnership, buzz in statements, or Indo-Pacific nods in speeches, these signal Canada's firmness. In closed-door talks, away from cameras and YouTube analyses, will Canada hold the line on sovereignty, or bend to Beijing's pull? As economic pressures mount on China, this could flip the power dynamic, but only if Canada plays its cards right. Wrapping this deep dive into the Canada-China Diplomatic Reset 2025, from Annan's Beijing breakthrough to tariff tugs-of-war and human rights tightropes, it's clear this is about far more than handshakes. It's sovereignty on the line, with Canada poised to level up or risk the trap. If you're buzzing on Canada-China canola tariffs updates, or rare earth metals geopolitical tensions, like this video to keep the conversation alive. Subscribe for more on Indo-Pacific Alliance's Canada 2025 and global trade shifts. And comment below, should Canada prioritize values over deals with China, even at economic cost?